All right. Well, it's super exciting to be here. I'm really happy to be speaking at the final RailsConf. It's such an honor. And yeah, my name is Marco. I'm a full-stack developer and open source contributor. I love open source. I have been trying to help with maintaining Stimulus Reflex and Cable Ready in the Hotwire ecosystem. And I've been on and off maintaining Stimulus as well. The last few months, not so much anymore, but I still keep an eye on the repo. But today I want to talk about the Rails view layer, and more specifically, Action View. So Action View was first introduced in 2004 with the actual first release, Rails 05, and it was part of this MVC framework. But back then it was Action Pack that was containing both control and the view part of that stack. But we were already using ERB at the time. And ERB stands for Embedded Ruby, which means that we just have templates and plain text files sprinkled with Ruby embeddings inside of them. With Rails 1 in 2005, we got layouts and partials, which we already know and love and still use today. And in 2007, with Rails 2, we got the new HTML-ERB file ending that we also still use today. This replaced the RHTML file ending from back then. With Rails 3, we got HTML autoscaping and also the output safe buffer from an Action View, which meant that you didn't have to use the H helper anymore to render user-provided content to the browser. We also got Action View templates from the MERB merge, which provide a unified interface for different file handlers. You could kind of think of this as for ERB, for Builder, for Slim, for Hammer, all of those, kind of one interface to handle them all. With Rails 4.1, we got Action View variants, which allows us to specify different variants for the same view, like the mobile one, or a web one, or a printer one, or whatever you might fancy. And we also got the Action View extracted as its own gem for the first time in this release. With Rails 5.1, we got Form Width, still a well-known helper today, still quite useful. And with 6.1, we got this very special Action View component approach that was landed in a beta, early version of Rails 6.1, which then turned to be View component. Joel was kind of talking about this in the talk in RailsConf 2019, and he was kind of explaining why this is needed, why it does make sense, and what it improves, and what the issues are with Action View. Action View component didn't make it into Rails, but we got this render-in API that's actually useful for just giving any class or any object the possibility to be rendered by Rails. With Rails 7, we got Hotwire by default, and with 7.1, we got partial strict locals, which are the views helpers, or kind of the magic comment at the top of a partial to kind of define the templates or the API for this partial. But all in all, I would say this has been really stable. There hasn't been too many changes to this whole framework. There have been a lot of things happening under the hood to make it more performant, to make it more reliable. But most of these features were additive, not really like breaking, which makes it really easy to rely and build on, but also means that there were a lot of other approaches that were happening in the same time. But still, Rails was always about server-rendered HTML, and Action View isn't going anywhere. Action View is here to stay. And so is ERB. And I just think it's as pure as it gets when it comes to templating, that you can just see the HTML next to your like Ruby snippets. And this is just the most straightforward I can think of. Which means that the advanced tooling that we need is getting more important, especially now with Hotwire being the default in Rails. We want to have this built into the default tooling stack. In the last Rails survey, we also saw that Stimulus kind of rose up to the top as the #1 framework in the Rails ecosystem. But we also are seeing the same for the broader web community. In the JavaScript state of JavaScript survey, we also saw Alpine.js rise up from up to 8% in 2024, and HTMX, which is similar to Turbo, rise up to 7% as well. So So it's all about server-side rendered HTML and HTML templating. But that doesn't come without its issues. So there are quite a few issues that we have and see that we somehow need to address. Some of these are partially solved with third-party libraries like view components, encapsulation in the view boundaries, and the reusability aspect. Performance could kind of be solved with that too. Tooling is still out, question. Testing is kind of weird too, because you have to do either full integration tests or full system tests, which is quite expensive. And the more front-end logic you add and complexity you add, the more complicated it gets to maintain these apps. So today I want to talk about a bit more like how we can improve the tooling aspect and how we can improve the the view layer itself. So one feature I love about Rails that I always liked was this index, this error page where it shows you the error, it shows you the backtrace, it shows you the environment variables, it shows you even this console you can interact with. And it's really nice experience to debug what's happening. It's even kind of recognized in the broader web community that there's still nothing like it in any JavaScript framework these days. So it's still interesting to see that this hasn't caught up in other frameworks. But when it comes to HTML ERB templates, it's quite interesting, it's quite hard to figure out what went wrong. So in this case, obviously you can see that there's a missing closing end tag here. There has been some work to make this better, obviously. I think Aaron and John worked on this to make it better. But it's still not to the point where you can easily see what's wrong in most cases. Especially syntax errors are quite tricky to figure out. But what we have in JavaScript, in the JavaScript ecosystems, they have really awesome tooling. And that's something we can look at and kind of inspire us and take it over to Rails. So here's an example from Vite, the bundler. They show you this error message right away when they see error and where it's happening. And that's been the theme for Vite in general. They have this awesome theme going on where they really set the bar high for how developer tooling should look like. So Vite has a really well-integrated workflow all the way through from the view layer, the bundler, server-side rendering, the dev server, hot reloading, testing, documentation. It's a really nice, coherent experience from start to finish. And the thing is that people coming from these frameworks expect these tools to be the same in our ecosystem, in Rails and in Ruby. And I believe that every language that's being created today, or any tool created today, should have tooling in mind to make it easier for people to get started with. And yes, it's JavaScript. So you could say it's still they reinvent the wheel every week, but it's something we can learn from, even as the Rails community. And don't give too much credit to these frameworks for the most part, but I think they figured out the view layer, they figured out the components, they figured out developer experience, and the whole tooling aspect as a whole. But that's been the case for Rails too, I think. They have really nice integrations, all the gems work with each other, you just plug it in, it always just worked. It seems just wrong that the view layer doesn't have that kind of level of fidelity. Yeah, a lot of it's just plug and play. You use this gem, use that gem, it just works. And that's why I think it makes sense for us to also adopt this kind of level of support for the view layer. If you open any editor today, be it VS Code or any other one, and you open any JavaScript file, you just get good tooling. Instant feedback, diagnostics, refactoring tools, there's all there. It's a great out-of-the-box experience, it just works. So how does it compare to Ruby? For the last decade, it's been kind of a mixed experience, but I feel like now with the Ruby LSP, this quite improved quite a bit. Even now that VS Code is now recommending Ruby LSP as the default tool to use with Ruby. It's a one-click installation, and you get a great experience. But that's not the case for HTML-aware files still. It's still a different story. And that's why I've been trying to focus on that to make it easier for people to use Hotwire and to use view tooling as a whole. That's why I was working on Stimulus LSP that I showed off a few times over the years. It's been going great. I think it's a nice tool. The same with Turbo LSP. but the kind of problem was that they only support HTML. If you aren't familiar with Stimulus LSP, it's a tool to just show you what's wrong with your stimulus attributes, with your values. It also helps you autocomplete them, so it's like easy to get to know what's actually should be in this attribute. But yeah, no ERB support, it's HTML only, and a lot of these Rails apps rely on these ERB helpers. You can expect a view file to look like this, but it might not. It might just look like this, and then it doesn't really help anymore. You get no diagnostics, no tooling support here. And that's been the case, I think, in general for HTML ERB over the years. And working on these tools, or around these tools, gave me some insights that I thought I want to tackle the bigger picture. And that's what HERB is. HERB is a set of tools designed to work with HTML ERB files. And it's an ecosystem of tools. It's initially meant to be a parser, a format, and the linter for HTML ERB. But now that I was trying to build this out, there were a lot of more utilities that kind of came up that we have now been building to kind of make it even better. Some of these tools are needed for the tools above to make them work, but some of them are even like nice to use on themselves. So first up, the parser. I talked about this at my Ruby Kaigi talk earlier this April. But to sum it up, it's a HTML-aware ERB parser. It's a new one. It's written in C. It's built on Prism, the new Ruby parser, to kind of parse out the Ruby snippets in the ERB files. It's designed for tooling first, and it has support for all the action view helpers. So what this does is it kind of builds up a tree, an interleaved tree of HTML and ERB, and brings it up into one tree. So you have one syntax tree to look at to do analysis on these nodes, which means it has awareness of these files, how they are structured, the hierarchy. But then the question is, why do we need a new tool and cannot just use Nokogiri or Prism like as individual tools already? And if you look at this file here, for example, and we kind of say we split this up into two files, and we extract from the Ruby part the HTML, and from the HTML part the Ruby. You have a Ruby file and the HTML file, and you could say, let's pass them to Prism and Nokogiri respectively. Let's parse them, we get a result back. But now we have two results which we cannot really piece back together anymore. So we lost kind of the HTML context where we were interpolating and using this interpolation, which doesn't really help. So even if we could piece them together, we wouldn't really be able to like allow or control these edge cases. And that's important, for example, here. If you look at this snippet, you see that you have an opening tag and a closing tag for the ERB, for the ifs, which belong together. But in the middle, you have this text. But any existing parser wouldn't tell you that these two red blocks are related to each other. They are just individual ERB pieces. So you have to know that these belong together. And that's what HERB does. It looks at this file. It finds the first block, looks for a matching end block, and puts this together in one node in the whole tree. And everything inside of it is considered children of this if block, and that's kind of in the tree itself. So we have now this hierarchy of how these nodes belong and relate to each other, which really helps for the tooling. And this is quite different from this first approach where we had just the one and the other, and we couldn't really do anything with that individually. So this opens a lot of doors for us to understand and analyze these documents. And the first one is now this formatter. So the idea here is to make a HTML ERB auto-formatter that can throw any file at, either be it structured already or unstructured, and it will output, when you save or run the CLI, a nicely formatted file. And that's, I think, something that's been missing for a long time. There has been tools that did something similar, but nothing to the point where I could set up easily or where I was happy with the results. So I think this is really a nice change. But also you can integrate this into your CI workflow to make sure that all the files are well formatted throughout your code base. And here's a little demo in the editor. So you save it, and it kind of snaps right in. And you can mess with this, indent it more, save it again, and it snaps right back. And you save it. There we go. So yeah, that's the first thing. The next thing is the linter. In Ruby, we have this Ruby style guide to kind of show how you are supposed to write Ruby. Some of these rules are a little bit aggressive, some of them aren't, but there's something to kind of configure and use, and it's really valuable. But we don't really have anything like this for view files at all. And this guide should be to enforce the best practices and avoid common mistakes, so we can kind of help people do the right thing in Action View. So here we have more diagnostics on how common mistakes that you see. Some of them are HTML only, some of them are HTML ERB, some of them are only Ruby, but it's a limited set for now, but we have more on the roadmap to add to these rules. We also have a few accessibility rules to make sure that we are respecting all the area attributes, that we have more like links, we have all tags on images and all of that, just like built into the editor. Some of these are semantics, but we also have some stylistic rules. One of them is, for example, this one here, that we just add white space around the ERB tags. And you can see there's a link in this diagnostic, so you can click on it. It will open the docs. It will show you why this rule is important and what it enforces and why we think it's a good idea. Gives you some examples as you might be used to from Rubocop. But now it also shows you in the docs itself why this specific example is not good or what's wrong about it. And I haven't really seen this in any other linter docs. I'm wondering why. But I think it just makes sense to put the rules together why this is wrong in the docs directly. So if you have any ideas for linter rules, what you want to kind of enforce in HTML-ERB files, please open an issue and you can see what you can do. It also comes with a CLI with nice error outputs and kind of showing you the context where stuff is happening. So we have syntax highlighting, we have dimming, so you know which line is the right thing, and pinpointing the location. And at the end, you get a summary of all the rules that are violated in your run. There's also simple mode for a more compact view, so you don't have like these long boxes of context. Yeah, this is powered by another kind of utility library called the herb highlighter. It's for syntax highlighting. And I just realized that I was looking for a library to highlight HTML ERB. But then I realized that I just built a parser to build like these tools. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should just do it myself. So this is that kind of package for showing the context in the terminal. Then one other thing that's kind of interesting is like a rewriter or a refactoring tool. So you can say, I want to replace all span tags with div tags. I want to replace all data attributes with something else, or values inside attributes. And that's something that's been very common in the JavaScript communities, using like plugins like Tailwind's Prettier. So the idea here is that you kind of sort the classes in the right way that makes sense, what's like the most impactful, and group them in some way. But now, since we have like these tools, we can also enforce this like not just on HTML elements directly, but also on all these tag helpers to kind of have them enforce them both, which is really cool. But yeah, this gives us the confidence to like refactor these views reliably. That just makes sense that we weren't really able before with just search and replace. Another utility is the herb printer. The idea here is that you have some HTML or some ERB. When you parse it, you get the whole tree. But now when you have this tree, you want to get it back to the source, so the printer just takes this tree and brings it back to the source code. Which also means when we mutate the tree, we can do stuff in it, and then this is going to be useful for when you want to build autocorrector for the linter. So we can parse it, change the tree, print it back to source, and then write it to the file again. And then finally, to kind of tie it all together, it's the herb language server. For now, this is an independent language server you have to install separately, but I hope that this will get integrated maybe sometime upstream somewhere. But yeah, the idea here is you can install this in your editor. We have a few supported ones already, maybe more to come. But the idea here is that you just have it in your editor, you edit it, and you get instant feedback of what might be wrong. There are parser errors, there are closing tag errors, there are opening tag errors, and even Ruby errors from Prism now that you can see that something is missing, like here's an end missing, or If you just have a if by itself, you can also see there's going to be a conditional missing. So yeah, that's this. This is the VS Code language server, and you have some specific optimizations for VS Code. So you have a settings screen, you have the status bar, which is analyzing the views, and you have a nice view to see how your application is doing, how many files are have linter errors or failed to parse, which is going to be helpful for us to diagnose and improve the parser for everybody else. If there's anything that's wrong, you have this nice little quick fix to open an issue on GitHub with some context already, so it's easier for us to diagnose what might be wrong. There's more stuff to do. You can say we can detect unused partials, unused views, maybe do jump definitions for these render calls, so you can click between them. There's a lot of things we can do now with this tooling. And one more thing we have for other tools I want to build on this is a language service, which is going to be used probably by the stimulus LSP and the triple LSP. I have a working version of this locally. I was able to just go in and replace the HTML language service from VS Code with my language service. And now, out of a sudden, just this works, and this is just great to see that these stimulus LSP diagnostics also work on these ERB tags now, which is cool. This is not live yet. I have to still wrap this up, but what I have to share now is this new version of Herb, which includes the linter, the formatter in the preview. We have this VS Code extension and the language server improvements and some more bug fixes on parsing. But yeah, this is like what we have today, but this doesn't really answer the vision aspect of the whole thing. So what I want to talk about now is now that we have these tools, I realize that we could maybe do even more now that we have the whole introspection. And I was thinking that there might be a possibility to do a new ERB engine, but for me it's important to say here that this is a vision. This is not live. We need to explore what we have, what we could do, and even if none of this is viable in production, I think there's a chance for this to just be helpful in development or tooling. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, a rendering engine for ERB. What we have right now is a string template engine, which means we just concatenate strings. But what we really want is a HTML templating engine. An engine that cannot produce invalid HTML. And if you kind of look around what we have in the whole ecosystem right now, a lot of tools, also in other languages, and one of them really sticks out, which is the Phoenix LiveView. This is written in Elixir, and what Elixir has is like the regular Elixir files, but they also have the EX, which is the equivalent to ERB. The syntax is pretty much the same, but the one thing they have, what we don't have, is a HEEX templates, which is HTML and EX, like combines. But we don't have this in Ruby. So that's kind of where the name is coming from, or where the name was initially inspired from, that we could have a Herb engine that's only produces or can produce valid HTML when you render out these templates. So when you take a regular ERB file today and render it through the ERB engine, using ActionView now, we have this missing closing tag here. But if you just pass this to ActionView, to the template, and use the ERB handler, we compile this, it will just do the thing. It will just add the strings together, and it will just render this out. But what we could do now with a new engine using Herb, we could say we take the same partial, we try to render this time using a Herb handler, and we try to compile these templates. This would just crash and say, I'm not compiling. And it will also give you the diagnostics and the errors where something went wrong, and that's just the whole idea here, that we cannot produce invalid HTML. If you take this further, we can also say, is there like reactive templates that we can do with this? And the inspiration here is also, again, Elixir with their LiveView. So if we kind of take this to Rails, what we could say is we could look at view files, and we can render this out for the first time. We have this items array with 3 items. We render this out. So we have to render the view. But now items changes, and it gets in a 4th item, and somehow we keep to have track of that. I'm not sure how yet, but we have to keep track of this somehow. But what we could say now is that items changed. Let's look in the view where we are using items. And we can see that we are using items here. So maybe we can just say, let's render this block where we are using this only once. So you render this for the 4th item, get this snippet of just the 4. And since we know how this is being rendered, we can just insert it into the DOM because we know where this should be inserted into. Obviously, this requires JavaScript on the client too, but this would make this a lot more declarative, right? You don't have to say this should be rendered here and appended there. And, you have to do no frames, nothing. It just figures it out by itself, which is what we want in the end, I think. So yeah, ERB is kind of here to stay, I think. Action View is here to stay, but we want to make Action View more Railsy, or more level it up by keeping it Railsy. And that's the whole idea of this reaction view that I was thinking of. So what Heeks is for Phoenix LiveView, Herb could be for Rails reaction view. And there are multiple levels of how we could kind of go, or where we could go with this. But the first one would be to just say, let's give better feedback to these errors. So this screen again, instead of doing this and showing showing something like this, we could say, let's show all the errors right here. And it doesn't render, but it will show this div is open and closed, and there's some syntax error here too. And level 2 would be to say, let's build this actual engine so it doesn't even compile, to go from the string template engine to a HTML templating engine. And this would need to be backwards compatible, obviously, but it's only as long backwards compatible as you are writing valid HTML. So if you give it a template, it will just crash, right? But that's good because you want to know where you have in and out HTML in the application. That's what you want to fix. But we can take this even further and say, let's add checks for HTML5. Let's add accessibility checks right into it because we have already rendered out the whole page, so we can do more static analysis for accessibility. We could also do more checks for cross-site scripting and unsafe interpolation, or more checks that we can do at static analysis time. Since these don't really kind of crash the whole engine, it wouldn't crash out the whole process, we could kind of annotate them and show them on the first render of the page and show them in the top right corner. There's probably also more we can do with Action View and optimizations of how it compiles and how it renders these templates behind the scenes. And I guess Hartley did some of that exploration on the first day in his talk. But there's also more from John here, where he was trying to, or where he is pre-compiling templates on boot. So it's more memory efficient. But the thing is that we could probably do more advanced tools, more advanced optimizations now that we have all the introspection. Maybe something like inlining all the partials directly, so you don't have to do an actual render call anymore, or other things. So that's probably more to explore. I haven't really dug into this yet, but that's something to check out. Then for the 4th level, we could say, yeah, let's bring these reactive views actually to our view layer. And I was thinking to keep it kind of backwards compatible, so you don't have to kind of replace your whole app with all these new views. What you would do is you would kind of rename your ERB file to a Herb file. And with that, you opt in into this new stricter engine. And with that, you also get just these progressive enhancements. You can gradually adopt this where it makes sense. You don't have to do an all-or-nothing approach where you say, yeah, replace it all, or go all in on React. We can just say in this place it makes sense. Yeah, and only use it where we actually need it. And with this one simple change, we can kind of really pinpoint and make sure that we only do this where it makes sense, while still keeping it Railsy and Action View as we used to have it. So technically, this also allows for more syntax to be introduced. And if you look at something like Rux from Cameron, we might be able to also say, let's use something like JSX-inspired syntax to render some of these components. I'm not saying this is the syntax we want to go for, but it's something we could explore now that we kind of say we have this breaking change in this opt-in mechanism. The next level would be to say client-side templates. Joel was talking about this in his talk too, where he was saying we should pass in values, not whole objects, like only primitive values. And if you only do that, we can say, with a limited set of ERB, not all the whole spectrum, we could do what React is doing with the other way around, from going from the client to the server side. We could say, let's bring our ERB views to the client. They could transpile to React or to web components or whatever it is, doesn't really matter. But it would give us some ideas on how to implement optimistic UI updates while keeping and reusing our views from the server side. Or it might help us to improve offline functionality because we can reuse our views and can use them on the client. Or we say we want to have some smaller interactions. We don't require a full server handshake or like back and forth. We just do these smaller interaction pieces. And for the last level, which is probably too ambitious, but it's still going to show it, would be to say, let's bring in the external components from other ecosystems. So you don't have to say we have to throw it all away, but we say we only want, again, on certain pages, we want to have more. Now you could say this is what inertia Rails already does in a way. But the thing with inertia is that you have to say I want to have all of it in React, and that's all there is. So you cannot say I want to have only this piece in React and this other piece not, so it has like all or nothing. But what I'm thinking of is more like import maps Rails, where you say I want to import these components from ChatCN or something else, or from our local app, and then you're able to use those in your view, in your ERB view, and the engine knows how to deal with those, how to hydrate those, and how to make them render on the client. This is similar to TurboMount, but with the difference that it's tightly integrated right into the engine. It has tooling built in. There's no setup, and it works out of the box. Again, this is only to show what would be possible, could be possible, but I think it's still fun to explore. So yeah, what's next? I want to finish the format and bring it to a state where it's really nice and good to use, and to make it configurable too, and to work on Reaction View more to make that maybe even viable. I have a talk at Euroku later this year where I want to show like at least a prototype of that, bring it to life, and see what we can do. So yeah, to conclude, I think Prism had a big effect on the whole tooling and internals of Ruby, and I think that Herb could have a different effect for templating in general. And given that we have built awesome tools in the whole community, I think that this is now the time to bring the same care and love to the view layer. And with Herb, I think we have this to level it up. In the end, I love Ruby, and that's why I'm here today. I want to keep using Ruby, and I want to keep it as attractive as possible for people to use. I want to thank these people who in some way made this today possible, what we have, and the contributors that directly contributed to the repo. So yeah, check it out on herbtools.dev or give it a star on GitHub. And one thing I want to ask is, please run it on your apps. If it breaks, great. We can improve it for everybody else. If it doesn't break, awesome. Or use the VS Code extension to figure it out. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.